Eliza Carter had never imagined leaving the city, let alone settling in a quiet suburb where the loudest noises were the rhythmic ticking of lawn sprinklers and the occasional bark of a dog at a mail carrier. For most of her adult life, she'd been entrenched in the sterile world of university labs, studying biochemical reactions, perfecting botanical extracts, and guiding research students. But when the university placed her on indefinite administrative leave after a prolonged dispute with a senior colleague over authorship of a key paper, she didn't push back. 2 years of mental exhaustion and petty bureaucracy had drained her resolve. So, when a letter arrived informing her she'd inherited her late uncle's suburban home on Maplewood Drive, it felt less like a fresh start and more like an odd mix of exile and salvation. Her uncle's house had sat vacant for nearly 3 years, aging quietly behind a row of oak trees and overgrown hedges. It wasn't falling apart, but it bore the look of neglect, a place no one had loved enough to maintain, yet not abandoned enough to collapse. The garden, though, was another matter. Once her uncle's passion, it had morphed into a chaotic tangle of wild stalks, dried remnants of past harvests, stubborn roots, and invasive ivy choking old wire trellises. As a child, Eliza had spent summers there, captivated by his peculiar plants, some medicinal, others fragrant or oddly striking, all meticulously labeled in his tidy script. He wasn't a typical gardener. He didn't care for manicured lawns. To him, plants were living experiments, studies in coexistence. In her own way, Eliza had followed in his footsteps. Now, standing amid the waist-high overgrowth, she felt a faint pull, an echo of those childhood summers, a buried spark of curiosity. It took her a month to bring even a semblance of order. She didn't hire help. She worked alone, methodically mapping the soil, testing pH levels, identifying what had self-seeded or died off. She replanted chamomile, lemon verbena, and Korean mint, plants tied to her pharmacological research on natural sedatives and immune boosters. There was no intent to sell anything. She just wanted to work again, to nurture something that responded to her touch. The garden became her refuge, a therapy, a way to reclaim herself outside the cold confines of labs and academic rivalries. Most neighbors paid little attention, though a few offered polite hellos. An elderly woman dropped off a tin of sugar cookies, remarking it was nice to see the garden revived. Another offered to clear out the old trellises, but Eliza declined. She wasn't there to mingle, no barbecues, no block parties, no card games. She craved solitude to heal. That is, until Margaret appeared. Margaret was the type who carried herself with an unshakable air of command, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, every step exuding mastery of suburban social codes. In her late 50s, she moved with the vigor of someone decades younger, always dressed for action, linen pants, a collared shirt tucked just so, often clutching a clipboard. Their first encounter came as Eliza knelt in the dirt, replanting basil and bergamot, hands caked with soil. Margaret stood at the gate, arms crossed, eyeing the pots and tools along the path. "You're doing a lot out here," she said, her tone neutral but edged with judgment. "I don't think we've met. I'm Margaret, 3 houses down." Eliza stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and nodded. "Eliza, I just moved in. This was my uncle's place." Margaret didn't smile or soften. "I remember him. Quirky, but neat. Kept to himself." She paused, letting the words linger like a subtle caution. "We're a tight-knit community here. Everyone pitches in to keep things running smoothly." Eliza, already annoyed by the interruption, gave a vague hum, hoping it would end there. It didn't. Margaret's gaze shifted to the plants. "Interesting choices. That 1 inch," she pointed to celandine and pennyroyal. "Isn't it toxic? We've got kids and dogs around." "I know what they are," Eliza replied a bit sharply. "They're fenced off and for research, not eating." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Research? You with a company?" "No, an academic," Eliza said, cutting it short. Margaret offered a thin smile. "Well, we have guidelines for gardens here. I can drop off the welcome packet if you didn't get it. Approved plants, safety rules." Eliza didn't respond. Margaret left, but unease took root. Over the next few weeks, Margaret's presence grew. She'd linger by the fence, peering in, sometimes leaving the gate ajar when Eliza was sure she'd locked it. Tools left out were found neatly aligned, too perfect to be chance. Then plants started disappearing. Skullcap, then kava, then young yarrow stalks, all clipped cleanly at their prime. It wasn't weather or animals. Someone was taking them, selectively, with purpose. Alarmed but unsure, Eliza logged each loss, sketching a map of the thefts. She didn't install cameras yet, but she locked the gate tighter and stored her tools inside. Margaret stayed outwardly friendly, waving from her porch, asking casual questions about the garden, but her eyes held a sharp, calculating glint. The real escalation came with a letter slipped under the gate one morning, folded, with Eliza scrawled in shaky cursive. It read, "It has come to our attention that your property may not comply with local vegetation rules. Certain plants with psychoactive or irritant properties are not allowed in residential areas. Remove them within 7 days to avoid complaints." No signature, no official mark, just a vague threat. Eliza saw through it. No such rule existed. Her plants were legal, documented. This was intimidation, not law. She photocopied the note, filed it, and kept working, though tension now shadowed her every move. A week later, a man in a windbreaker knocked, claiming to be from Municipal Code Enforcement with a complaint about non-residential agriculture. He had no ID, no paperwork. Eliza demanded credentials. He mumbled excuses and left. She trailed him discreetly. He went straight to Margaret's backyard. She called the real code office. No record of any complaint. The man was a fake. Then her compost bin was tipped over, contents strewn across the path. Footprints led to the gate. Eliza didn't call the police yet. She documented it. She bought motion sensors from a garden store, installing them under key plants to ping her phone at night. They triggered at 3:18 a.m. Tuesday. Brief. No one there by the time she checked, but her monk's pepper was gone. She filed a police report, starting a paper trail. Margaret kept up her act, chatting about the weather, but Eliza stayed silent. A flyer appeared on the neighborhood board, warning about toxic plants and aesthetic harmony, and signed but unmistakably Margaret's tone. Eliza planted more valerian, tightened her garden's layout, and planned. This wasn't just about plants anymore. It was about autonomy versus control. Margaret had crossed a line, and Eliza was ready to push back, not with confrontation, but with proof.